the big revelation for me, I guess, over the past sort of 5 years or so has been to not try and step into someone else's concept of painting, but to open up a concept of painting for myself. I've become less and less interested in singular sort of monumental painting. There's a tendency in painting culture to try and make a definitive statement. The cultural logic of that makes less and less sense to me. I'm kind of de-emphasizing singular sort of monumental painting, sort of painting as statement, and moving more into a sort of relational, sequential sort of painting as process, sort of continual painting. You know, it's like, you know, I find a motif, in this case the cat motif, and I don't think there's a definitive painting I can make of this motif. It's just a kind of investigative, continual painting. So my background originally is in animation filmmaking and games, though I'd learnt painting as a kid from an artist, Robert Fairley, who had taught me when I was sort of 14, 15. In the late 1990s, painting was like really not, you know, high priority. Time-based media, film, installation, that was the universe that I sort of went into. But then over the years, I sort of come to really understand that painting has this incredible flexibility and this capacity to absorb and reflect back ideas from a wide context. And sometimes I feel like I'm working through ideas in painting that have their origin in film. When you start to engage with painting as like continual process, there is no definitive painting, there's just long sequences of paintings, you know, theme and variation. It does have a filmic, animated quality that starts to kind of come to the forefront of my mind, and that's something that I really relish. So the key idea for me is that I think painting after the internet is a paradigm shift. I think that internet culture has restructured everyone's thinking. Yeah, so the painting after the internet is a paradigm shift that has to be accounted for, but that doesn't necessarily mean a technological aesthetic. It has more to do with the structural logic. So for me, it's like, you know, if you think about a browser window with multiple tabs and the incredible discontinuity of like your banking, your Amazon page, your social media, pornography, you know, writing a letter to a friend, you know, it's like, for me, that cultural logic has to come into painting. And so for me, radical discontinuities within paintings feel much more normal, much more suited to where we're at. So there's a quote here from Martin Kippenberger that I wanted to sort of relay. He says, "Simply to hang a painting on the wall and say that it is art is dreadful. The whole network is important. When you say art, then everything possible belongs to it. In a gallery, that is also the floor, the architecture, the colour of the walls." This idea of kind of painting as networked is interesting to me more and more. I've shared a huge amount of the making of these paintings online. And Ian and I were talking this morning, there's this whole idea of like the performativity of making paintings and putting them online as being the networked nature of contemporary painting. You know, this show starts in the kind of tendrils of that networked, Instagrammed production. And this is like the body. The show begins on Instagram at the tip of the tentacle and works your way back to the understanding of the full body of the thing. So it's important to acknowledge that my eyes and my hands have been trained by Nintendo, VHS, Sky TV, cinema, comic books, all of this stuff, this pulp kind of like image culture, this electronic kind of like screen culture, and that's only accelerated. I was at the kind of thin end of the wedge growing up, and it's just got faster and faster and faster, okay? I'm painting after all these realities have left their mark. You know, the video game is in there. The animated film has kind of locked certain logics into my brain. Imagination, invention, play, costume changing, identity changing, virtual reality. These are the languages that are at the forefront of my mind when I'm doing something very old-fashioned like oil painting. Part of this means that we're bringing painting down. We're bringing painting down off its pedestal and kind of like forcing it into the mass culture of images. So the internet gives us access to incredible amounts of information about all of painting, particularly museum privilege, 20th century modernism, and also technique and method brought to life via YouTube in ways that go beyond dry texts. What does it mean to be a painter today and have, I can go on a museum website and find a 20,000 pixel square image of a Max Beckmann painting or a Picasso and so on, and I can pore over the surface for hours, way beyond the kind of the time I could spend in a museum before getting kicked out or elbowed by someone that wants to have a look, That has real implications for painting, because if you're serious about painting, you have the means to spend time with painting that didn't exist before. I'm constantly thinking about how I deal with painting networked into a sea of new information. There's a tendency I see sometimes in painting to kind of pretend like that world of information doesn't exist. I'm for a kind of like letting the information flow through painting and kind of energize it and change it. I picked the cat as a motif because everybody gets it. It's universal, it's quick, it's easy. It puts the question of subject matter on the table and then really quickly moves it off. I'm interested in making paintings about things, but I don't think the thing is hugely important. I think all painting is abstract, even when it's about a thing like a cat and so on. And the great strength of painting in contemporary culture that is a 24/7 cycle of events is that painting is a slow, abstract thing. It's slow, lateral thinking, works you in a different way. We're all being worked by everything. We're being worked by technology. We're being worked by society. The experience of painting is a gear shift that remains valuable. By using simple motifs in a sequential way, I'm interested in moving myself and others into a feel for paint itself, for the picture plane. Cats, yes, okay, we're done. But now let's think about painting in this relational way. When you stand here, you can see two paintings in your field of view, and they're different. What does it mean that they're different? This you could call a kind of picture plane, but for the concept of this show, I've been calling it the cat dimension. Okay, the cat dimension is my kind of like bespoke theory that gets me through the making of these pictures. The cat dimension has many different meanings for me. On one level, it has to do with early internet memes from the lolcats era. The internet is made of cats. The internet is just cats and pipes. These kinds of ideas that were in circulation like a decade ago. There's a sort of nostalgia for that for me. It's also a way of pointing in a very obvious way to post-internet painting. This idea of like, well, what do you make a picture about in 2018? Make a picture of a cat. It's easy. Everybody understands it. It's about making paintings, images after the internet, what gets shared and privileged in the flow of information. There's a network power to a cat picture. If I make paintings for the cat dimension, if I make paintings of cats, they have a high chance of being shared online because cats share well. It's about the durability of a painting as a meme in online culture. It's called painting for the cat dimension, and this idea of kind of providing things for a cat world rather than doing them for yourself is something I think about a lot. Once I became more and more networked as an artist, I became really aware that I would do a drawing, and the sort of motivation for the drawing was to put it online and give it to the online space. It was an exercise in giving and providing for a space, the Instagram space, all the other spaces that exist. Bagpuss, the TV show, I remember the cat lived in the shop, and the shop was a kind of shrine to the cat. A sort of, like an altar to the cat. And the girl brought things for the cat. She brought junk, and the cat magically brought the junk to life. So the show begins on Instagram with a disclosure of process, serving the platform, showing every step the logic of the internet, not holding everything back, not privileging the gallery, using line and drawing and all of the layers and layers and layers of paint in such a way that there is something to look at from day one. The painting is coming into being from that first moment of being a charcoal drawing on a canvas. There's a performativity that gets it from there to here. So the other thing is the cat dimension as having to do with escapism and fantasy. When I was a kid, I was really profoundly influenced by animation, as I've sort of said, and I would watch Japanese animations like Totoro and European stuff like the Moomins and Bagpuss and all kinds of stuff like that. What interests me about these fantasy cats is they're only partially in our reality. They're all ghost cats, haunted cats, spirit cats. They're kind of like between realities, and the humans that deal with them kind of approach them tentatively and offer something and maybe get something back. So what's interesting about these fantasy cats is they're only partially in our reality, much like the Cheshire Cat. If there's a god in this world of the cat dimension, the Cheshire Cat is the god, or maybe the demiurge, the sort of malevolent god. We have to believe and partially step over into their reality and give something up. So the cat dimension is a kind of picture plane in which an internet sensibility is allowed to invade and shape painterly decision-making. It's a homemade theory. More and more, I'm interested not just in synthesized practice, but synthesized theory. I don't want to use an off-the-shelf kind of discourse to decide how to paint and make pictures. I want to shape my own funny, weird, idiosyncratic misunderstandings, theories in order to make pictures. I'm much more interested in that cooked up thinking. I guess the final two things I want to say, one is about the painted world. When you paint for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, you're spending a huge amount of time close to paintings. You're in there. The feeling of being in the paintings, going into and out of the reality of multiple paintings, one after another. It's like a video game. You're in this other reality. You're spending more and more time in this sort of painted world. A painting could be a sort of supernatural object that you go into and you live in its reality for a while. That's what it feels like more and more when you make paintings and you have a studio surrounded by paintings. And this kind of installation approximates my studio in the sense that I have all these paintings around and I go into them at different times on different days until they're finished. The last thing I wanted to say was to do with the frames, because frames are like this taboo thing. The frames allude to the metaphor of the portal, the magic mirror, the interdimensional door. The gallery is like a sort of hub world in a video game, and these are all the levels. These are all the realities that you can kind of step into and go to.